yourselves a round of applause. In this great city, there is so much, and you chose to be here with us. That's
true. I feel like that's definitely a
you
big
could have been
compliment.
anywhere in the world.
There's about 30,000 other events happening tonight, so as is the case.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Everyone here, and Sara and Yasmin, thank you so much for being here. We're super excited to be having this event here tonight. There are books up at the front that you should buy them, and they'll also be in our bookstore after the event too. And you can come anytime and browse 1804 books up at the front. We have lots of different great books. But my name's Ryan. I'm the operations manager here at the People's Forum, and this event is coming at a really important time, I think. We have really we couldn't have two better people here tonight to have this event, and they proposed to have it. We didn't even propose to have it to them, and I'm so glad that they did. So, yes. I think we're going to talk about Palestine a lot tonight, so I won't go too much into it, but I will say that right now in Gaza, there is a historic, there was a historic uprising that happened and is continuing to happen, and the Israeli repression of that is extremely severe. I'm sure people saw the news of the bombing of the hospital in Gaza that happened last week, and more than 5,000 people in Gaza have been killed. And these are bombs, missiles, bullets that are funded in large part by the U.S. military. And the People's Forum, alongside a coalition of hundreds of organizations, we've organized events over the course of the last few weeks in New York City. There have been events around the country. And on November 4th, we're calling for a march on Washington. There should be a huge number of people there. And we're organizing buses from across the country. But I assume that many of you are from New York. And in New York, we're sending at least 7, maybe 10 buses. And yes, and all of you should come with us. There's information on the People's Forum website about registering for the buses, and we're also making a flyer. I think UA might be making a flyer right now that'll have QR codes to get a ticket for the bus. But yeah, we would love to have you join us in DC, and without any other ado, I'll leave it to Sara and Yasmin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the People Forum for having us. So I think the way we're going to do this, we're going to introduce ourselves. Sara's going to do a reading. We'll have it in conversation. I'll do a little reading, and then we'll go to questions. Sara, would you like to?
Can I start by introducing you, or do you want to? Because I want to say nice things about you. It's
yay,
much nicer, much easier
to
say nice things about Yaz than about myself. But I do want to say, aside from being a good friend and advocate and comrade and just fierce human being all round, Yaz, you are a multidisciplinary artist and a media mogul, I would say. Yeah, I just thought of that on the spot, and so I was really excited to share it. Like media mogul, yeah. Like there are books she's written, plays she's written, poems she's written, TV shows she's writing and will continue writing, TV, she's been on radio, there isn't anything this person hasn't done. So incredibly talented. And we are all the luckier and richer for it, culturally speaking, politically speaking, and otherwise. But here's the kind of the official bio. That's the unofficial. You can use media mogul from moving forward. Yasmin Abdel-Magied is a Sudanese-Australian writer, recovering mechanical engineer, and award-winning social advocate who writes and speaks on politics, society, culture, and technology. She's published 3 books with Penguin Random House, including 2 middle-grade novels, You Must Be Layla, and the award-winning Listen Layla, which she is now adapting for screen. Yasmin is also developing a slate of projects for the stage and screen, and obviously needs no introduction, but I'll keep reading. A globally sought-after advisor on issues at the intersections of race, gender, and faith, Yasmin has spoken in over 25 countries on social justice and inclusive leadership. She founded her first organization, Youth Without Borders, at the age of 16, leading it for 9 years before co-founding 2 other organizations focused on serving women of color. Her TED Talk, What Does My Headscarf Mean to You?, has been viewed over 2.5 million times and was selected as one of TED Top 10 ideas. In all her work, Yasmin is an advocate for transformative justice and a fairer, safer world for all, as if that wasn't clear. Yeah. Back to you.
All right, so I've got the unofficial and the official bio for Sara Saleh. Not only is Sara a wonderful friend, but is honestly one of the most dedicated, tireless, mashallah, like in terms of organizers and activists that I know in Australia, being like at the forefront of organizing for Palestine and for, you know, women of color generally, and supporting all other movements, I think, in Australia. You know, Sara is there, mashallah. And the other thing that I really appreciate about Sara as a friend and as like a comrade is, you know, there is always a safe space to discuss things that are really challenging. And I think that is really important in organizing spaces. Sometimes it can feel difficult to get into things, or to be like, I don't know the answer for this, or I'm not sure about this, or how do we go about this? And the fact that, you know, I can always turn to Sara, or even, you know, send a disappearing message being like, hey, I feel this way about this thing. How do I handle it? And there's always, you know, a listening ear, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So that's the unofficial bio. The official one, Sara M Saleh is a writer, human rights lawyer, organizer, and the daughter of migrants from Palestine, Egypt, and Lebanon. Her poems, short stories, also her poetry is amazing. She's got a poetry book. She's selling her novel here, which is awesome, but her poetry book comes out in November. She's like the first Arab to win both of the biggest poetry prizes in Australia. All the other poets are jealous. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. So she writes poems, short stories, essays, and a novel, and has been published widely in English and Arabic in Australia Poetry Journal, Overland, Mianjin, Red Room, Kill Your Darlings, and the list goes on. She's the co-editor for the groundbreaking 2019 anthology Arab, Australian, Other, Stories on Race and Identity. She runs poetry workshops in countless classrooms, community spaces, festivals across the country, and has performed nationally and internationally. Sara recently completed her Juris Doctor. Her research concentrating on human rights and international humanitarian law, police accountability, the prison industrial complex, and the incarceration and detention of marginalized populations. So Sara, welcome to the People's Forum. Amazing. And would you like to introduce us to your work through your poetry?
I would. Thank you, Yas. So I guess it would be smarter to read from the book that I'm like supposed to be, you know, selling tonight. But I was in, I think, obviously, given recent events, kind of feeling the poems that I'm about to share with you. They'll just be 2 short ones, and then we can kick off our conversation, if that sounds okay. So this first poem, and this is the cover, designed by the wonderful Why Not, who you can find on Instagram's incredible Lebanese Armenian designer. This poem is called Thistle, to Lose a Lover / Country. Summer 2006, which is, some of you might know, is the year that Israel bombed Lebanon. So summer 2006. Yes, I kiss the boy who calls me soft, a kindness I can't forgive. A forest of thistles surrounding us, a cover from the unbearable July heat mounting in our breath, yes. I feign insouciance, try, but under the patchwork of stratocumulus clouds I can almost reach the way light tethers itself to darkness just to free it. Yes, I followed you up the mountain, the furthest point this whole country is a 3-hour road trip. We are only days away from the bombing, crossing the borders into Damascus, you to Cyprus. The monsters will follow us for the rest of our lives. Yes, it's me. I try to be less monster. I thought I could outrun the year. I lost a country in a long line of many years. I lost many countries. Yes, they destroyed my country, and I respond the only way I know how, by letting them make a country of my body. Yes. Ever since I left, I commemorate country into combustible things, photographs, poetry, plastic film. Mother, teach me how to unhold that boy the way country unheld us. See, I did not want to make myself open. I did not want to make myself a poem. Mother, teach me to flower like a thistle. Mother, teach me. Teach me. Thank you. The second poem that I'd like to share with you tonight, I haven't read before, so it's some new shit, and it's called Reading Derish at Qalandia Checkpoint. How long have you been waiting? I just got here. How long have you been waiting? A few hours. How long have you been waiting? All night. How long have you been waiting? Since the day I was born. A woman is standing too close behind me in the swollen crowd, her breath foggy on my neck. I thumb the pages of my book and sigh loudly. She sighs back, and I can feel all the ghosts through the towers of barbed wire and cameras. The Baba holding his clothes up like a flag at the guards behind the tinted glass. The law student eager to make it to the final exam, her messy bun pinned in place with a 2B pencil. The teta ready since the rooster sang, sun rising, with her permit to begin chemotherapy. The devoted husband on his wedding day. He doesn't know in a few hours his body will become a bargaining chip. The young man with autism who they will chase and shoot at his school gates, police investigation pending. And I think of Cassius Turvey, 15-year-old indigenous boy who was punched and stabbed for being black. Palestinians know about going to school and not making it back. No resolution, no report, no textbook stops this. Police investigation still pending. The evidence redacted, his rights redacted, his childhood redacted. No condemnations, no conventions save him. At Qalandia, the soldier cradles his Uzi comfortingly, like an instrument he is performing. The olive branch insignia on his uniform flashes in the haze of lights and multilingual greeting signs behind him. The soldier greets his comrade hello, revealing teeth that match their belts of ammo. They talk about the settlements that are expanding. Oh, thank God for cheap social housing. We find ways to survive this daily exercise in humiliation, to numb the abyss of time. See, each moment any of us remains alive is a miracle. I flip through the pages of my book. Reading Darwish at Qalandia is a provocation. I confront the bare iron grids. They are bone waiting for skin. The tooth bar is not wide enough to squeeze a single orange in. Thank you. It was a vibe. You know when you just like read something and then you just kind of are transported? So for a second, I don't know where I went, but I'm back now. So thank you for listening, for your time. Thanks, yes. So I guess we're here today, and I wanted to kick us off. I really do take comfort in rooms like this and spaces like this. Despite everything, I feel like they're a little bit of a shelter, replenishing from the state of world affairs. And I think you being here, which I'm very grateful for, is kind of part of the important work of liberation. And I really want to talk about that. I want to talk about a lot of things today. But I do want to ask you, Yaz, where are you at right now? How's your heart? What are you feeling? Tell me your vibe. What's the vibe?
I asked Jess earlier how her soul was, and she was like,
What a question.
What a question.
I was not there, so, you're welcome. I didn't know that, yep, what goes around comes around.
Gosh, I think that if I'm being honest, I think it's. I mean, it feels trite to say that it's a very tragic time. I think the other thing that is relevant, and you and I have spoken about this, is for those who aren't aware, I'm Sudanese, and in April 15 this year, a war began in Sudan. A war between two belligerent generals who have nothing to offer but death and destruction. And, you know, they've all but flattened the city that I was born in, and my entire family has kind of been dispersed across the world. And so I think I've spent much of this year in a state of organizing and grief and mourning. And I think something, and I'll be honest about this, I think something that's really difficult for me personally about this moment is trying to hold that while also trying to hold space for everything else that's going on. Because, you know, I have been someone who, it has been important to me to be in solidarity with Palestinian people. I mean, I think for so many of us, the cause of Palestine was our entry into, you know, organizing. Such is the tragic nature of the state. And so, you know, my earliest marches were about Palestine. And so it's something that, you know, has a huge place in my heart, but I almost feel like I have so little to give at the moment because of having spent months trying to like get people to care about Sudan. And so I think this is something that I'm finding really challenging at the moment. You know, over the weekend, we marked 6 months of the conflict in Sudan. And it was this weird thing of like, there's huge marches happening about Palestine, and also, and I'm in this position where I'm like, am I taking attention away from something really important, or am I trying to actually be one of the very few voices that's like, hey guys, there's a country and there is a genocide? Yeah. So I think that's something that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about how to do, how to be, and also how we as people not on the front lines sustain ourselves, because you know what, 6 months in, it's pretty hard. You know, I lived and breathed that conflict for 3-4 months, and then at some point I was like, I need to start answering my emails again. I need to start finding ways to pay my rent again. And I think that's something I think about as somebody who's always involved in movements, is what does it look like to do this work sustainably? Yeah.
I mean, you said take away attention from, but I'm going to pull you up on that, because I'm going to say that I don't think that you trying to make connections and building on is a case of whataboutism or taking attention away. So you like definitely don't, you know, I don't want you to have that internalized. I think there's obviously a shared struggle in some ways, and there's, as you say, access points that we can connect and build on, because we all, I'm sure this isn't going to be unfamiliar to anyone here, but liberation is tied up with each other and our intersections. And I would think that if there wasn't space for, you know, Sudanese activists like yourself to make these connections, then we failed as a movement, Palestinian or otherwise. And I think, so for me, like I want to preface that, you know, by saying that. But I would also like to ask you, you were organizing for quite a while, still organizing. What were some of the kind of shifts that you noticed or that came about in building the Sudanese the movement, particularly globally? Like I was, as an outsider, also trying to support and do what I can and make those connections as well. I was noticing that there was a lot of connecting going on between Sudanese activists and the diaspora, and there was a lot of like learnings for us and a lot of lessons. And I guess I wanted your take on what was it like? What was the strategy? What are some of the things that came out of it that you're kind of I won't say, maybe proud of, but also things that we can use, that we can learn from?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's always useful when we think about this, like when we think about the diaspora organizing, thank you, Ryan, to think about the ways in which diaspora have been created, right? So the Sudanese diaspora largely came post Omar al-Bashir. So Omar al-Bashir was a dictator who came to power in '89, and the majority of people who left, like we're talking middle-class educated, who left Sudan, left in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And so our parents, so that's my parents, you know, they left in their 20s and 30s, like they were 20 years, 30-year-olds, which meant that they had grown up in a particular version of Sudan and moved and decided to like put roots down in new places, and only their children now are kind of like, you know, the Western Sudanese kids, right? So the English speaking or French speaking or German speaking, whatever. And then you have the wave post like the year 2000, and like in the 2000s where you had Sudan split into two, and then you have quite a lot of refugees. And so you've kind of got, but they tended to be from like different parts of the country. They tended to be from the West and so on. And why am I giving you this geography kind of story? It's because I think what we're seeing now, what we saw in 2018-19, which was the revolution that took Omar al-Bashir out of power and preceded the current war, was this diaspora that was a first generation diaspora, actually. It wasn't a multi-generation, it wasn't like we had sort of been there for a long time, many decades. It was often the people who, for the first time, maybe they're in their 20s or early 30s, they have access to money, they have like access to understanding how to lobby in their countries, understanding of the system in the way their parents didn't, and so on. So I think it was actually the first time that the Sudanese diaspora tried to use the more traditional mechanisms of organizing to create an impact in Sudan. And so what you saw in 1819, and I say 1819 as the shorthand for the revolution, was like a real, like a, what do I want to say? Like the mechanisms of storytelling in the diaspora was a key part of like winning the hearts and minds of people around the world, right? So I don't know if you might remember, Blue for Sudan was a really big deal. The people were telling the story of what was going on. There was like this kind of utopian creation in front of the military headquarters where, you know, people were creating schools and having mini hospitals and really showing what Sudan could be like. And that was a really inspiring thing. But also because there was access to video and film and so on, people were able to do that on the ground and then connect to cousins or whatever all across the world. So it became quite an interconnected thing. I think what's been challenging since, so to give you a very, very quick rundown, the revolution happened 1819, Omar al-Bashir left. There was something called the Transitional Council, which was a sort of partnership between the civilians and the military. And then 2.5 years in, the military was meant to hand over power to the civilians. And at that point, the military did what the military do, and they said no, and there was a coup. And so at that point, they went to their traditional mechanisms of oppression. They cut the internet, they cut connection so for over a month there was like no word at all from Sudan, and that's cutting telecoms and internet is a key thing that we're now seeing oppressive governments do. And also the thing about Sudan that makes it more difficult is Sudan is not part of like the SWIFT financial system. It's very difficult to send money to Sudan. It's very difficult to get things because for a long time Sudan was on the US state sponsors of terrorism list. Which I'm like, we didn't do anything, but anyway. We like,
know, you don't have to, whether you're a model or not, you're on that list. Like, we know why. We know why.
And so, I think the thing that has been challenging since is that things that really worked for us during the revolution have been less successful since, because I think, frankly, it's easier to tell inspiring stories about how, this group of young African people is overthrowing a dictator versus belligerent generals are killing everyone again. Like, I think we got really good at telling stories, and then the story became really difficult to tell. What I will say, though, is the networks and the ways that the diaspora have been able to kind of very quickly, frankly, there's been very, very little international support. Most of the money that gets to Sudan that funds the hospitals and so on comes from fundraising by diaspora communities. Yeah. There is, it's actually depressing how little kind of, even the evacuations when the war first kicked off of getting people out of danger zones, all of the Western governments just plucked their people out and they were deuces to everyone else. And so literally diaspora were working on Twitter and WhatsApp, being like, hey, my uncle is in this house, is anyone nearby, can somebody help? And then someone random would be like, yeah, message this person, he just got a bus. Like, that is how the city was evacuated. And so I think, like, wonderful and depressing at the same time.
The innovation of the tactics that I'm hearing is actually something that I think we've spoken about as well. And I know a lot of, for example, Sudanese and Palestinian activists exchanging resources, information, that kind of thing around how to get money when it's almost impossible because Western banking systems stop us from doing so, or how to reach people and communicate when, there's a media shutdown. And
Yeah.
I was talking to you about the kind of the language to use around that as well a couple of days ago. So, I appreciate these kinds of exchanges, I suppose, because that's part of the learning and the movement building. I also really want to ask you, and side note, I loved what you said about how they offered kind of alternative futures and literally kind of, manifested it in physical kind of protests and things. But I'd like to ask you as well, about the kind of the digital versus traditional organizing, and maybe it's not such a straightforward binary, but I'm interested in kind of what are some of the ways in which the organizers approach that.
Something that was quite interesting was, so say for example during the internet shutdown in 21, and it happened later on as well, what people did on the ground had served a very different purpose to than what people in the diaspora did, right? So people on the ground had to inform everybody else. If there's no internet, no telephone, how do people know what's going on? So neighborhood resistance committees, and the neighborhood resistance committees, if there's anything to know about the Sudanese revolution, is that it happened through the neighborhood resistance committees. They literally were just like in the neighborhoods, and they would kind of travel from door to door to door, letting people know what was going on, bringing people together to be like, this is what we're calling for, this is what you need to know, we're going to all be meeting at this place, if you need food, we can get it. Like, they became, that in the tradition of the Black Panthers and the Rainbow Coalition and so on, they became the service or they did what the state never did, really. And so, that was pretty amazing. And that was also what they could do. We couldn't do that from the outside, but what we could from the outside do was a completely different thing. We could get the word out about what was going on. We could put pressure on telecom companies to reinstate the internet, and we could also tell the story, the political story. And so I think it became very clear, and this is something as diaspora, and I'm curious, Sara, what your experience of this is like. I had to accept, I so wanted to be on the ground, right? So often it's like, I want to travel there, I want to be there, I want to be on the front line, but actually that isn't maybe where I would be most useful. Maybe where I'd be most useful is here telling the story and, doing a different role. And I think accepting actually that we all have different roles, and maybe those roles will change, but it depends on what you have access to and so on, is I think part of having a cohesive, or at least a movement that continues to evolve. But how with Palestine, how do you find it?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, well, two things. Firstly, a lot of us have obviously been highly activated. I said my nervous system is kind of all over the place over the last few weeks. And so it's really hard to kind of take a step back, breathe, and be proactive. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels like a response. Well, we are, being extremely reactive. And so I'm feeling that. And it's valid, and we're all feeling that. I think it's safe to say, speaking to Palestinian friends, activists, organizers, family members, we're all feeling that. But we have to kind of remind ourselves that we are safe. And I say that knowing that a lot of us exist in contexts where we are subject to Islamophobia and police violence and so on. So I don't want to obviously minimize that. But when I say we are safe relative to people in Gaza who are, literally under shelling day and night kind of thing. So we are currently, we have to remind ourselves that we're safe, that we can take a step back, that we just need to breathe and remember where we are and kind of try and regulate as best as possible so that we can go back into, the movement and the organizing and doing exactly what it is that you said, sharing the stories as I'm here tonight, or organizing other things on other fronts in the best way we know how. And there's a whole other conversation I want to kind of maybe touch upon later tonight around the extreme pressure of responding 24/7, needing to respond, and the capacity to grow a movement, and what it's like to do that under that collective trauma and making mistakes, all those things I find really interesting, like the psyche, but that's another thread that I'll follow later. You're going to notice that I tend to jump from thread to thread because right now it's like my brain at the moment. But to go back to the point of the question, so reminding ourselves that we're safe, that we're here, but the other thing, and this is something that's maybe a bit more sustained and kind of long-term, like a constant hum that you feel in the background, or that you hear in the background, is that a lot of Palestinians feel, that survivor's guilt, that, I'm not the one stuck in Gaza, I have privilege, I have access, I have a Western passport, I have languages, degrees, whatever it is. So you feel this kind of guilt, to your point around wanting to be on the ground and wanting to fight. But the truth of the matter is I'm not in Gaza. That is not my lived experience. That's not my reality. But 2 million plus people are. And so what is my role? How can I best, add and build to the movement, honor them? And I'm really learning from my elders, from ancestors, that guilt and that shame, that survivor's guilt, is a colonial weapon. It's a colonizer's tool to kind of make you feel helpless, or to, for you to feel they benefit from us feeling helpless, from us feeling guilty, and that has, impact on your nervous system. You feel like you're in a state of fawn, like you can't do anything, you can't be effective. But actually all of that, again, I just have to keep reminding myself that is a tool that isn't going to serve me. And so I'm actually an extension of the struggle. I'm not an outsider. Palestinians inside, people in Gaza, people organizing, people fighting for us and putting their bodies on the line for freedom, that is not they're not victims. That is from a place of power and strength, and they are doing that with pride for our resistance movement. And we've also got to honor that liberation, like reframe that as that's a power move. Like, that's something to be proud of. We're struggling and for our freedom, and we're an extension of that struggle. And so it's kind of, I'm saying it, and it's hard after a very long time of feeling guilty, but it's really important that we kind of reframe that and understand that our people aren't victims per se, but we are doing something because that is our dignity on the line, it's our freedom on the line, and it's our movement that impacts everybody that is on the line.
So speaking about extensions of struggles, you see this segue. Talk to me about the extension of your work, which is your writing and the book, Songs for the Dead and for the Living.
I mean, so my dad joke is I wear a lot of hijabs, so I do, different things, and one of them is my art and my craft and my writing. So I write in poetry, prose, and this is my debut novel, which was really exciting to have released. Oh, thank you. That was totally staged. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to clap, and they're all going to start clapping too. Thank you. So I think, interestingly, this book kind of started out, I really love speculative fiction as a genre, and I've always wanted to write, kind of like that, that dystopian epic, the one that's going to be the one that, it's better than all the dystopian epics before it, kind of thing. Like, I wanted to write,
that kind of vibe.
Oh no, except better than Octavia. I think I have enough sense to just peel back, draw the line there. But yes, so I wanted to write a spec fic book, so I actually sat down and started plotting, and it was actually a lot to do with the carceral system, detention centers, because I work a lot in that area, racial justice, and kind of seeing the connections between the border industrial complex and colonization, Islamophobia, and the treatment of refugees and so on. So I sat down and was writing that. But at the same time, I think there was a lot going on in my personal life. So, I was in a relationship, I'm in a relationship, and I started how relationships have the tendency and the audacity to I your baggage out, and you start to realize you're like, oh God, I have a few more flaws than I realized. Where are these flaws coming from? I am a flawed, messy person, but this is just rude.
Never.
Yeah. This is rude. So I was really interested in kind of, again, self-reflection, critical, and I think that's really important for any individual, even in like as an organizer and movement building. You know, we have to have systems of accountability, but I think accountability to yourself is important, and self-awareness and critical reflection should be part of our practice as organizers and writers and artists. And so I was thinking a lot about that, the root of my flaws, and eventually it led me to my parents, of course. So I was like,
The root of
of everything, yeah, my parents. I was like, all right, parents. So I love my parents. They're good peoples, but I was kind of interested in who my parents were kind of before they had me, and how they kind of came to be the way that they are, because obviously they're not infallible either. And so it kind of became this whole thread that I was following, and it led me to this place where it was like, okay, so what had to happen for all these events to conspire, for all the people in my life, for all, like, what had to happen for all of us to be sitting here in this room tonight? Okay, I find that so fascinating. Like, where in our history and our ancestral roots did something shift that you're sitting here and I'm sitting here and you're sitting here and you're sitting here? So, and I was kind of exploring the same question with my mom, and it was like it all kind of led to the Nakba, which was the kind of the ongoing dispossession of Palestinians, which is officially May 15, 1948. But what Palestinians will tell you is that it's an ongoing thing. We're obviously being subject to ongoing dispossession, land theft, and so on. So it was like, that's kind of the long-winded way, of how I got to the book that I ended up with that is not spec fiction. And so it ended up being, I kept returning to this point where I was like very inspired by my mom's migration story, and how they were exiled from Palestine, found themselves in Lebanon, were subject, to a civil war there, and then, traveled all the way to find themselves to so-called, Australia as settler migrants and as people who are dispossessed but complicit in dispossession there. So the book is basically inspired by that story and follows this family, is large, loving, chaotic Lebanese Palestinian family who have to leave Lebanon because of the civil war and find themselves, traversing different countries, different continents, in order to find a place that, that will have them and where they can feel safe. And it's told through the eyes of the daughter, the youngest, Jamila. And Jamila is basically, your typical teenager who wants to explore life and live dreams and play football and have friends and, all of that, but at the same time is kind of stuck between what teenagers want to do, live, follow dreams and be free, but also hang on to like safety and security and family, because as refugees, that's often, something that is very elusive to them. So we see, it's really interesting to be able to follow her, see through her eyes, get into places that young people can often slip into unnoticed, in and out, and observe what's going on and kind of ask questions and explore in a non kind of judgmental way, which was really fun for me to write. And so
How did you come
story.
to deciding to take this, or to have this story told through the eyes of Jamila? Because it's always interesting when somebody chooses, the age of the protagonist and so on. So how did you arrive?
I think that was it. I was really interested in, because these are big questions, and wanting to talk about, for example, some of the themes in the book is not just about Palestine, but is about the treatment of Palestinians in Lebanon as refugees. And so Palestinians have been subject to a lot of discrimination for a whole lot of reasons, but mainly because of the civil war and kind of a post-colonial history of fragmentation, which is probably not going to be, again, unfamiliar to a lot of people in the room who come from post-colonial countries or traditions where there has been that sort of history. And so for me, it was like I really wanted to explore these big themes, but from the eyes of a young person who will be kind of like living them and have intuition and thoughts on them and feelings on them, but not really fully understanding the complexity. So sometimes it's refreshing to be able to have that view or approach these topics from that angle, but also because kids have a very good way of eavesdropping on things and find it, like, giving you information that you otherwise might not have access to.
I love sort of that protagonist of that age. And I'm curious, Sara, so you sort of, your people would best know you for your poetry. So how did you find writing a book of prose?
It was really hard. Yeah, it was hard. It was hard. I found it really challenging because I think it's, poems you can kind of enter and exit, and they're much smaller pockets of work, even though I can spend hours agonizing over a single word and its placement in a piece, because, poems are spacious, they're sparse, you've got to really think about that. But it's contained, whereas the book, it was like, I had plans, and, in poems, what I love about writing poetry is that you can play with language, you can play with the subject matter. You might come to a poem, an idea, and it might end up, take you elsewhere, and you follow that thread. But it's contained in a few pages, so you're going to follow that thread, but it's only going to go so far. It's only going to go a few pages. Try applying that to a full 300 plus book. There were so many things. I was all over trying to follow all these threads. But when I started to let myself have fun with that, and let go and actually let the characters speak to me instead of being really rigid, because that's what I thought a book had to be. Like, I thought that writers approached books, and maybe some do, but approach their, their chapters and their characters with the exact framework, knowing exactly where they're going to go. Once I kind of let go of that a little, I found it a lot easier. And I'm going to flip the question back to you, because even though this isn't the Layla double series, Layla's obviously a young one as well. So tell us why you chose that and why you chose that genre.
Yeah, so for context, I before Talking About a Revolution, which is a collection of essays, I published 2 novels, like sort of young YA novels. You Must Be Layla and Listen Layla, and the character is 13, 14. I used to joke that part of the reason I chose to write books for young readers is because I have the sense of humor of a 9-year-old, which is sophisticated, okay? It's sophisticated. I'm a sophisticated 9-year-old. Yeah. But I think there's like a lot of, so often people talk about, the broad differences between YA and adult fiction. YA, there tends to be a happy ending, right? Things kind of get, tied up in a nice bow. So I wanted to write something, I think, for those books. I wanted them to have, because things happen to Layla. Like, she really goes through it. In the first book, she gets bullied on her first day, and she headbutts the bully. I'm not spoiling anything. It is like a key part of the setup. And also, in the second book, she goes back to Sudan and she gets involved in the revolution and so on. Yeah, I was like, let me educate the youth through fiction. But I wanted things to kind of, I wanted the readers to leave inspired as a.
So who is your audience?
Oh, so I think formally,
specifically for the second book.
Yeah, honestly, it's sort of 9, 10 to like 14. That's kind of the age group, right? Anyone. Well, honestly, I also think that it's quite joyous to read books like for that age group, because you can kind of read them in one sitting. You'll kind of go on this wild journey, but you'll kind of hopefully leave inspired by the end of it. And also, I think. For me, the other really key part of this was like, when you ask people what books changed their life, they typically tell you a book they read when they were 12, 13, 14, right? Those are the books that we remember. Those are the books that are transformative. I know that those are the books that I refer to. Tamora Pierce, like all like those kinds of books I read at that age. And I was like, I can do that for young people. If I get them at that point, then boom, all of a sudden I've created a little,
Sadly, most of the books that were available to me in kind of mainstream, especially that were very like Eurocentric, were like Sweet Valley High, and everybody was
Sweet
like
Valley High.
Blonde.
I was a valley girl. I was a hijabi, Sudani, nun-looking valley girl.
And blue-eyed, and I was like, damn, what kind of life? Not living that life with my 6 p.m. curfew and strict,
Sarah,
Egyptian
in
dad.
my mind, I was a knight. That's what I was when I was 12 years old. I was a knight in shining armor. I don't know who I fought for because I don't believe in the monarchy or the state.
Oh.
But I was a knight.
A rogue knight.
Yeah, I was a rogue knight. Exactly. Yeah. Which sounds like a threat. But anyway, it's fine.
And I'm kind of interested now that you've traversed all these different genres, following years of being a media mogul. What I'm interested in, kind of what might seem like kind of a basic question, but it's deceptively complex. What is success? Thank you, sir. What does success look like to you as an artist?
Yes. Oh, yeah. What is success?
See? What do you think?
I see. Yeah, it's good. So this is a question I ask myself on a regular basis as someone who made the unwise decision to go from working as an engineer to becoming a writer.
You say unwise?
Unwise.
No, unwise according to our parents?
Yes,
sure,
yeah. And our bank accounts.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
My mom literally said to me on the phone, she was like, Yasmin, if you want a nice life, stay an engineer. But if you want... She
a
was
meaningful
like,
life.
She was like, no activist has died rich and happy. I was like, okay. But she was like, but if that's what you want to do, I will support you. Wow. Which, thank you. I think, so where was I? Oh, yeah, what does success look like? Okay, so here's the thing, right? There is a lot in the life of an artist that you can't control. You can't control how many people read your books. You can't control whether it'll be a bestseller unless you are wealthy enough to buy as many books as it requires to become a bestseller.
Is that how they do it?
Oh, genuine.
My God. Hold on, be right back.
Find a Nepo baby, get them to buy all your books. Yeah. So there is so much that you can't control. And also I think, if I spent all my time focused on like the outcome, like the moment when the book comes out or the moment that I reach a particular, I can't control if I'm going to win various awards. So I can't. But if I focus on like, let me just win that thing and then I'll be happy. Honestly, that's like a path to misery, right? Because also those moments just don't last long enough. They just don't. And so what I learned was, or the thing that I kind of arrived at was, do I enjoy the process enough? Like, do I enjoy the process of creating work enough? And at the point when the process of creating the work and the process itself of trying to get the work out there and sharing the work and grappling with the work and so on, as long as that's enjoyable, as long as I'm getting something out of that, as long as I can keep doing it, then I think that is success. And it's taken me a long time to get, there are some people in this crowd who I have spent many hours talking to on the phone and in person, including my husband, who on a regular basis I will call up and be like, I'm a terrible writer, I think I should quit. He'll be like, what happened?
Imposter syndrome. No, boo.
Do you know, it's not even imposter syndrome. It's like, I don't even think I'm an imposter. It'll just be like, as an engineer, right? I don't have to continuously prove myself. I just get a job, right? And then I'm an engineer. So it's fairly straightforward. But as a writer, you're continuously grappling with this vague identity. You're very uncertain as to what it even means. It's so nebulous.
That's part of being a writer. It's literally that falling into this trap of just constantly
just the spiral. But as long as I can become friends with the spiral.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. That's what I'm working on. Befriending the spiral.
I mean, I guess my other kind of thought on that.
Also, you're going to have to answer this question.
Oh yeah. Wait, what was the question? What does success look? Oh man, yeah. See, unlike you, I try not to think about that. Otherwise, it's going to be a spiral that will not end well. I mean, I don't think that material attachment is the goal for me, because, or material wealth from, I mean, great if people can make a living or sustain themselves from art, but unfortunately the sad state of affairs is for most artists, and I speak particularly to the Australian context, those who are privileged enough are probably, full-time writers, like generally speaking, or people who have the ability to usually, are wealthy or relatively wealthy, can sustain themselves full-time as writers. And that kind of sucks a little bit, because it's like, it means that you always have to be doing something else, and you can't just focus on the writing. And obviously that kind of has added pressures and burdens. And I think ultimately as well, to me, writing, I have this kind of thinking around whether writing is enough in and of itself. So like, I think about the goal, and I'm like, well, when we're talking about success, like, is writing the goal here? So is the fact that I'm just writing a noble, beautiful pursuit, and is that enough? And can I just say that's what my measure of success is? Or is my measure of success using writing as a tool of transformation, particularly for our communities? And so then I think, again, when I'm kind of reflecting on my role in that, I mean, I wish I could just be like, yep, I'm a writer, I write, I go up into my little treehouse hole and like just sit with my cat and my coffee and write forever, and that's success, because I'm doing the thing I love, the craft. That's what I want, and that should be enough. I want the damn thing. That's all I need. That's it. I don't need to explain it to anybody. But I actually think that, and we probably don't have time to talk about like the role of artists and the responsibilities, but or what I think are our responsibilities and ethics. But ultimately, to me, writing is, especially in this day and age, like, literacy is critical to our communities. Writing is a critical tool. You talked about sharing stories when we started this conversation. Writing and being able to do that is part, writing these books, seeing yourself on the shelf or on the screen, that's part of our like responsibilities. And therefore that makes writing, a tool to something, not the end goal itself.
Yeah, I really like the idea of writing as a tool of transformation. Although, just a quick side note,
yeah.
the thought of, you said treehouse, and I was like, oh my God, climbing into that would be, I got tired thinking about climbing into the treehouse.
Oh no, there'd be an elevator, like, obviously.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking.
So what's
Is
the
that like
treehouse?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, well then that's all right. Solar powered. It's a solar powered elevator.
You got me. Okay. And it's accessible because
exactly. Boom. Oh, I love it. Okay, when are we getting this treehouse?
It's exactly bougie treehouse. Yeah.
I really like the idea of writing as a tool of transformation, and I think it's. And this is something, so for context, Talking About Revolution, which is a book of essays, came out last year, and then the other book that just came out this year in September in the US is a children's book called Stand Up and Speak Out Against Racism, which is available as well.
That's the perfect example.
Yes, which I'll talk about in a moment. But one of the things, so I wanted to write, so this is a collection of essays which is like half previously published essays and half like new essays that I wrote for this collection. And one of the things I thought about a lot when I was wanting to put this collection together was all of the essay collections that transformed me, right, in my political kind of awakening and consciousness raising and so on. It was, the Audre Lordes, the Angela Davis, the James Baldwins. It was actually their essay collections more often than not their novels, not necessarily the kind of long straight books, but the essay collections. And there's something about essays for me and collections of essays which sort of introduce ideas in a really sort of powerful, succinct way that I found utterly compelling, have always found compelling. And I think that's what I wanted to do with Talking About a Revolution. And I think, for me, the success of this book is not going to be in sales. And that was something I also had to like come to terms with, because I was like, everyone should read this book. I want everyone, and then the sales, especially compared, and I'll be very honest, compared to my kids' books, for example, they were paltry compared to my kids' books. Let's put it like that. And I remember, and we discussed this, I remember being very like deflated by this. But another friend of ours made the point, they were like, Yasmin, the kinds of people that you want to be reading this book, one person's probably buying it and then like sharing it with 5 other people. And the kind of people you want to be reading this book are going to be reading the same copy over and over, and they're going to find it in 20 years, and it'll spark something for them in the same way that you picked up so-and-so's book 20 years later, 50 years later, whatever. And actually, for me, it was about the ideas in this book being able to like live beyond me. And I'm never going to know if that happens or not, actually.
That's always going to be one of my favorite things about writing. I think that sense of wonder that we always get when we are creating things, and that sense of like, it's not just joy, but I think like messiness, and it's okay to kind of sit with that discomfort a little bit. But I also really appreciate you being honest with that, sharing that, because, you know, I don't believe in failures, just lessons, which I suppose is a common saying, but I really, really like actually practice that. And I think it can be hard when we have so much expectation on put on ourselves to like reconcile that. So I'm really proud of you for sharing that and for being honest, but not letting it define you or stop you in any way. You just kind of keep moving forward and hoping that you grow as a writer and as a person. I think that's the best one can hope for, right?
To the chagrin of my publishers, I'm like, what about this next book?
I mean, those are other expectations we have to contend with as well. I have two very quick, spicy questions I kind of want to ask you. One, I wanted to ask if you ever kind of think about, or if people give you shit for, like, you know, you have a fairly big platform and you obviously sometimes have to share things, people ask you to share things, and I'm wondering, like, how do you maintain bandwidth for that? Or even, like, how do you decide, like, what you might share, what makes your platform, I'm sure people accuse you of silence or selective activism, or, you know, it could just be fatigue. You're not allowed that. But, like, how do you approach, it's like spicy question number one.
Great question. So just a little bit of context. This would be like on a social media platform or wherever, and people kind of being like, why haven't you shared about X? Like, why haven't you posted about X? Like, are you being silent on X? I understand where people are coming from most of the time, because they're like, you know, if I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt, they are, they really care about something and they want to see something from somebody. But as I have posted on my Facebook page, I don't use Facebook actually personally, but I still have a page.
Facebook?
Well, yeah.
No, I'm joking,
but the reason, and this is important, you should maintain a page. If you don't use Facebook personally, maintain the page, because then other people will impersonate you. So like, there is actually a problem. Yeah, imagine if someone impersonated me and then started posting all exactly. Like, it could go left in all sorts of ways, or right, or whatever. You know what I mean? Oh God, where was I? Many years ago when I first set up the page, I was like, my page is not a democracy. Okay. My page is not a democracy.
Boundaries.
If you don't like it, go somewhere else.
Love it.
I do not work for you. You do not pay my bills. I'm not your servant. Like, I don't get. You can have opinions, but you follow me. I do not work for you.
Yeah.
And these are different dynamics. And I think that is like kind of like, and also I don't depend on the people who follow me for my income. And so I don't really care if they like unfollow me in droves or whatever, because ultimately, like, it is it's almost like a window shopping experience. Like, you're here to look and maybe learn and maybe observe, but generally, like, I think different people have different relationships with their, I'm probably going to get yelled at some point about this on the internet, but that's fine. I'm used to that. But I think, like, some people have a sort of more two-way relationship with their kind of community online, which will benefit them, for example, when they go to sell their books or to sell their products or whatever, and they have lots and lots of people who feel really invested in them. But ultimately, my platforms have all come kind of by accident. You know, I have always done other things, and then the platform has kind of come off the back of that.
Like the limits of social media activism, very much.
For me, definitely.
And it's good to have boundaries. I think definitely it's a very gray area. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like social is bad or social is good. It's just more complex in how you interact with it, putting aside, you know, Instagram suppressing Palestinians or like data surveillance and all that stuff. But I mean, broadly speaking, we're talking about just having boundaries. I'm not the kind of person who's like, I quit socials. That will never be me, partly because social media has been so important to Sudan, right? And
and genuinely, if it wasn't for social, like for Twitter, for Facebook, for WhatsApp, it would be very difficult for Sudanese people to have done the things they've done. So I have a different relationship, I think, to it than maybe someone who's not doing that kind of work. And also, I've met loads of people and learnt loads of stuff, right? Yeah. But I do think it is important to be very clear about one's boundaries online. And if people don't like it, they can yell about it, but I don't care. I don't listen to every person on the street who's yelling. So why would I listen to every random on the internet who can type in caps lock? Yeah. Leave me alone.
Caps lock. Woo. That's, definitely a block there. And my second very quick spicy question is, because I really like this topic around, especially, this can be a personal one, but I also think is very important for movements and relationship building with movements. But, friendships with kind of ideological differences.
You're going to have to answer this question as well. Yeah.
It's a good one. And I mean, who here in the room has like that one kind of racist uncle that you can't really kind of get rid of, right? So, there are lots of okay, yeah. So I'm
Sounds like I am the racist uncle.
So you're the racist uncle? Well, welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Transformed you. More so like, so like racist uncles you can't necessarily like get rid of, but friends who might have like ideological differences that are maybe a bit more like significant. It's not just like you think pistachio is a valid ice cream flavor, because it's not. It's like different. Yeah, I know. It's like more than that. More serious ideological difference.
I'm
than
pretty sure that's
I'm just done.
This pistachio hate I will not stand for.
Cashew supremacist all the way. No, actually not a fan of nuts generally, but what kind of...
I am shocked.
Oh my God.
What are these,
I'm losing you.
What are these revelations on the stage? You heard it here first, folks.
I'm losing everyone, aren't I? All right, we'll bring it back.
Okay, bring it back.
I want to know, like, if you have, you don't obviously have to go into detail, but I want to know if you've cut off people, like if you've just been like, no, we're not friends anymore, because of an ideological difference like that, or do you even cut people off, or how do you kind of balance that with making room for mistakes and growth and, all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, this is hard. This is really hard. Not to be that guy, but I did write about this on my Substack this weekend.
Oh, brilliant. So you're just going to direct us all to Substack?
Yeah. Yasmin.substack.com, just FYI. I find this really difficult. I find this incredibly difficult. I think it's quite live at the moment with all the stuff going on in Palestine. I think, first week after things kicked off, as it were, I found myself unfollowing quite a lot of people and unsubscribing and so on, being like, you can't just end your email with thinking of the Israelis. Like, what? But also, especially from people who like generally don't engage in politics,
or who posted and these are non-black, pretty much generally white people, actually white celebrities who posted those black tiles and then never said a thing after that, and then next minute are like, I stand with Israel. I think those were the ones that were particularly egregious and got under my skin.
So I found myself unfollowing these people, unsubscribing.
And unfollowing the people who followed them too. Yeah, just saying. That's what I did.
Well, and then asking, and I think maybe we're positioned differently in this, whereas, you're Palestinian, and so like your level of bandwidth to deal with this is probably, like actually I probably have more bandwidth in a way that, as in like I have more capacity to sit down and educate.
No, I get
right?
that.
Right, well, because you shouldn't be in that situation, but like I might have more capacity. Yeah. And this is the question that I've been thinking about, is like, how much grace do I give people? I don't actually know. I don't know the answer to this. I think that like there are some people who I have like preferred not to, like, not unnecessarily on this topic in particular, but generally there are some people where I'm like, maybe it's better if I don't know your politics, actually. Maybe it's better if we don't get into this, because I'm not sure that our friendship would survive that. And then there's a question of like, well, also the thing about me is like, it's not as if my politics are hidden. Like, it's talking about a revolution, right? Like, it's not as if I am a closet progressive. so I assume that if people are okay with me, they understand they know the politics that I come with. And then I sort of sometimes wonder, okay, am I in a position with a friend where like their exposure to me or their being around me or their following me will kind of bring them on a journey? Because the truth is, I also had to go on a journey, right? And so like, I think because I grew up in a more conservative household, I grew up in, frankly, probably a homophobic community. Like I grew up with a lot of politics that weren't quote unquote progressive, quote unquote perfect. So I studied engineering and I spent most of my time with engineers. Like engineers are not known for being super progressive. They're most like, and also we didn't talk a lot about politics amongst each other. But to give you an example, I remember once when I was in third year, I studied mechanical engineering. For some reason, I brought up whether or not you would work for a weapons company. Because like in the state that I grew up in, your jobs were either working for fossil fuel companies or working for weapons companies. And like, I was the only person in the room that said I wouldn't. Because everybody else was like, well, yeah, why not? You have like loads of R&D money to do like really sick research and you're not responsible for what it's used for. I'm like, it's literally a weapons company. It's not like it's not like you're inventing bolts and the bolt finds its way into a nuclear weapon. Like, you know actually where it's going. But there was an ability for people to distance themselves,
or cognitive dissonance,
or cognitive dissonance, or actually not really caring, right? The actual values were different, but these were all my mates, right? These were all the guys that I went to uni with and saw day to day, and so. You know, at that point, there was no way where I was like, oh, I'm just going to cut them all off.
Mass cancellation.
Right, it would just, I would have been the lonely one, right? Like it would not have mattered to them. At this point in my life, though, I think the conclusion I've arrived at is there is a difference between like cutting people off and like fully, and in fact, maybe even dehumanizing them versus choosing to not be their friends. Because friendship is a precious thing.
Yes.
Friendship is a gift of time and attention and care. And maybe not everyone has to be my friend. Maybe actually part of being my friend is sharing values. And maybe at some point, I just, one would hope that friends are people you're safe around. And if at some point you're not...
Did I make the cut?
Wow, we're here, aren't we? I mean, not a lot of Australians did, so...
Oh, shade. Okay. Sorry to the so-called Australians in the room.
What about you? How do you do with it?
No, I think I pretty much agree with what you said. A lot of it definitely resonates, and I think... I have learned to be, whether by like necessity or, just in terms of like not having that precious commodity of time, or otherwise I've learned the hard way that, you've got to be kind of, you've got to really think about those that align with your values. And I don't say that, in a sense of like, I don't want to be in my own bubble listening to people just constantly. I don't think I definitely can't say that, like, for example, we agree on everything. No, but we just have those, like the deep-seated, shared values around like caring about.
I feel like bubbles have a bad rap.
Yeah, I mean, also true. Bubbles.
People are like, don't stay in your bubble.
Bubbles have a bad rap. Bubble rap. That was good. That was really good.
No, but seriously, everyone's like, get out of your bubble. Why?
I want to stay in the bubble.
They will kill me outside of the bubble.
Yeah.
Leave me in the bubble. I have curated the bubble. Anyway, sorry. I'm yelling.
I think that's really fair. I think that's fair. I'm going to stay in the bubble too, but I think the important thing is to be able to have room for conversations, kind of, what we said earlier, like when there are disagreements, when you have shared values, you know how to resolve conflict even when it's challenging. You know how to have conversations that, again, you might not end up in the same place, but at least you're working towards it. Like, I want to be around people that I'm learning from, that are committed to learning, that are committed to, making this world a better place in the capacity that they can, committed to being honest and authentic to themselves and honoring themselves if they can. And I think my issue in the past was always trying to, quote unquote, typical like martyr, eldest daughter of migrants thing, like fix everything, save everyone. But it's been a very long journey of getting to a point where I'm realizing that that's actually a selfish thing and not a thing, an appropriate, like that's not my right to try and fix. That's everyone's own individual journey, but what you can do is create these collective spaces where, you know, open up these relationships, conversations, and so on to be able to get us to be on these journeys, I suppose. Because you know what they say, I guess a lot of what's going on right now is probably deeply rooted in trauma and fear and so on, amongst other things. And so, and that's part of it. So before you hit the reading, can I ask you very, very, very quick, 30 seconds, less than.
Okay.
Fave writing snack.
Fave writing snack? Pistachios.
Oh, that's evil. Wow, okay. Woo, really?
Like all almonds. Okay. I need a bit of protein.
Yeah, coffee. Fave writing song.
Oh, the XX's first album?
Oh.
Do you know the XX?
Yep, I do like them. And I also like... Sorry, just...
Oh my God, talking about literally Tracy Chapman. I know that album by heart. It is a banger.
It's the first song I ever covered, mind you, as well. Terribly, like obviously did not do Tracy justice, but yes, it's an amazing song. What do you do?
Wait, what's yours?
Favorite writing song? Oh, I don't have one. I have a whole playlist though that you can find like on Spotify that has songs. I'm just like I'm plugging it. I'm not going to get any money out of it, so it's fine if I share it. I'm just telling you, there is a playlist, Songs for the Dead and Living, if you want to listen. What do you do when you get stuck?
Pull myself out. No, okay, sorry. What do I do when I get stuck? I'm probably someone who goes for a walk. I know it's very boring. It's like, but you know.
It helps cognitively.
Yeah.
I have an accountability buddy, mainly, family members just yelling, how many words? You will not eat. We will withhold food until,
Damn.
And last thing, the book.
Nobody will eat until she hits her word count.
Literally. It's how we roll. I mean, my dad, like, had no idea about it. Like, when I was writing a book, I didn't want to tell them because of, like, the pressure. But then eventually when I told him, and at first they were just like, what do you mean writing a book? Like, that's not a way to make a living, la, la, la. And they were just, like, very similar to you. Like, I'm not an engineer, but a lawyer, so I'm still acceptable.
Still legit. It's
with the family. But eventually he was so invested that he would constantly be asking me about the word count. And I'm like, Dad, you're actually kind of stressing me out. Like, it's cute that you care, but it's stressful. Please stop asking. Last question. The one book you wish you wrote.
Ooh. Wait, do you know the answer to this for yours?
I mean, there's so many, but I'm just gonna say, given the times that we're in right now, Orientalism. I wish I wrote it.
Imagine if it was...
What a flex.
Yeah, that would be a flex. That would be a flex.
Imaginary book that I wrote.
Sara M Saleh, Orientalism. Probably the book that comes to mind is Abdulrazak Gurna's Paradise.
Oh, we read that for book club.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, you made us read it for book club.
Oh, sorry, I did.
Just forgot.
My bad.
All right.
Yes, okay, so I was going to read something from my essay collection, which I recommend, but I decided that I would read this lament, a very short lament that I wrote for Sudan, that was published earlier this year. Bismillah. In a meeting today, I looked down at my hand and realized my wedding band was missing. The indentation of the ring was still visible, the faint beige mark staring up at me accusingly. I blinked, scratching through the crowded corridors of my memory, searching for the moment I pulled it off my finger. My heart crowded my throat as I drew blank. I could not remember when I walked through the door of my flat in London the night before. I could not remember any details of the flight from Cairo. I could remember nothing but blurry days of Ramadan and Eid, glued to the television or phone or laptop, alternating through fear, grief, and cold, dark, numb shock. I remembered nothing but the slap of sorrowful waters Sudanese people were plunged in on the morning of April 15, 2023. Sudanese are no strangers to political upheaval, but the events of this Ramadan are different. Khartoum has never seen violence like this, never been held under siege like this. The people of the Tri-City area have never had to flee their homes like this. Civilians have no dog in this fight. They do not support either the Rapid Support Forces or the Sudanese Armed Forces. They're simply stuck in the middle of a deadly battle for power, and they are paying with their lives. Sudanese people do not deserve this. No people deserve to be brutalized by their own leaders. Sudan is an incredibly rich nation overflowing with natural resources, agriculture, and good humor. Yet we have been beset with such misfortunes, subhanallah. The injustice tastes bitter on our tongues between mouthfuls of kisra and mulah, moistened by the waters of the Nile. I can give you intellectual reasons behind the tragedies, the impact of successive waves of colonization and foreign interference. But today, rather than a political analysis, I make a plea. Keep us in your prayers and think of us kindly. Offer us your grace and your generosity, not your pity. Ease our paths into our new realities and refrain. And, oh no, there are some words missing. Well, imagine the rest of that paragraph. It was beautiful. I think it's maybe online. Oh, really? That was like that. I was really hitting home. Oh yeah. Do you mind like if you give me like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, I'll find the rest. Is that all right?
I was invested. Like, how does it end?
Oh my goodness.
Tell me.
I'm like, wait, refrain from what?
Jonah.
Oh my goodness. Bismillah.
Meanwhile, we are hoping to have, maybe if we have time, a few questions from the crowd. If anyone's like super eager, super keen to ask us spicy questions, quick questions, fun questions, start thinking about it now. Now's the time. How's it going? Yes.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank
you. Thank you for your patience. Oh my God, it wants me to. I am a human. Sorry, you know how it. Anyway, yallah, bismillah. I can give you intellectual reasons behind the tragedies, the impact of successive waves of colonization and foreign interference. But today, rather than a political analysis, I make a plea. Keep us in your prayers and think of us kindly. Offer us your grace and generosity, not your pity. Ease our paths into our new realities and refrain from shaming us for what we are unable to control. Amplify our voices, our art, our cultural contributions to the world. If you have the capacity, share your wealth, your compassion, your homes. Know that so many of us are simply surviving, but we want to live. Oh, do we want to live? May Allah cover the Sudanese people in blessings, inshallah, and all of you with us. I found my wedding ring this afternoon, alhamdulillah. It sat quietly in a bowl, nestled between my keys and a baobab seed from my last visit to the Sahara. I slipped the band back on. As I slipped the band back on, I caressed the fairy service of the desert fruit and wondered when I would next see the city of my birth. Salty tears darkened the skin of the seed, and I prayed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yas. I really felt that, to be honest with you. Thanks for sharing. It's published.
So I published it weirdly on GQ. Yeah, I don't know why. It's very random.
GQ Middle East or
GQ Middle East?
Yeah, because they tend to be. They're pretty cool.
They're
like
pretty good.
Decent,
yeah. So if you look up like my name in GQ, you'll find the piece. And some modeling shot. No, I'm joking. No.
I thought it, and then I was like, that's not appropriate to say, and then you said it. Okay.
Do we have any questions? Also, if you're on Zoom, we see you. Well, we don't, but we know you're there, and you can also ask us questions, right, Ryan? Yeah. All right, any questions? Yes. No, please, we love it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monsi. Pronouns she, her. I have a question for both of you in no particular order. I'm a writer myself, definitely not at your level. I work in diversity. And this might be an ignorant question, so I'll open it to everyone in the room. But I feel like there's genocide all over the world all the time. There's, conflict between religions, conflict between groups of people, marginalized people of privilege, everywhere. I wonder why right now what's going on in Palestine is getting so much more attention and coverage than even things going on in our country, things going on that have been going on in other countries. And I'm just wondering how both of you, as what I feel like are platforms and, you know, who bring awareness and we're very like in it all the time. Like you discussed how you need to have set a boundary to sort of not lose your shit like every day. Why is it right now that it's getting so much attention, in your opinion?
Two things. I want to say first and foremost that Palestine is not exceptional. It is not an exceptional like issue per se. There are ongoing colonial projects, including the current place that I'm from, or that I call home, not just homeland, and so being, you know, so-called Australia. And I think from that I also draw to more things, in that the fact that Palestine is not an exception should be something that is liberating, in the sense that that just means that we are connected to other struggles and part of a wider movement, and should be emboldened by that empires have fallen, and there are many examples of successful, you know, anti-colonial resistance. We were talking about the Algerians over the weekend as one example, and that's something that we should take, you know, comfort in, but also like draw on the lessons, draw on the strength, and try and like build. So for me, that's one thing that I think is really important to remember. And the other thing is like Palestine, again, specifically in Australia, but I think it's safe to say here as well, we would not be able to have the conversations we're having, and the shift that we have seen in the last few years would not be possible without the entry points, without the language shift, without the global movement, the growing movement that is like in large thanks due to BLM, and in Australia, and that's global, and specifically in Australia, First Nations BLM and First Nations campaigning. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, staunch Black women have been leading you know, the charge in so-called Australia, campaigning and allowing for that shift to happen. So for example, campaigns like Nothing About Us Without Us, understanding that in order to speak to these issues, you need to be going to people with the lived experience and the language and the expertise and the knowledge and the organizers, right? And so that for me is one of the biggest things. So like when I, you know, use the word colonialism now, 5 years ago, probably if I had said it, I would have been met with probably punishment or some sort of like a question and you know, explain yourself, a demand to explain myself. But whereas now I feel like I can speak to these things and take for granted that it is understood. So I want to like, you know, really acknowledge that and thank or like acknowledge those movements and show how important it is for the kind of wider issue, and the exceptionality, as I said, it shouldn't be an exception, it isn't an exception. The thing that I will point to is that the Israeli lobby, wherever you go, whether it's on, you know, on this land, on this, in Turtle Island in the US, and Australia, and Canada, and the UK, and other places, operates in much the same way, and silences in much the same way, and punishes and persecutes and infiltrates and has different, you know, their hands in different institutions in much the same way. And so when you ask me why it's getting a lot of attention now, I'm going to quote what other Aboriginal activists in Australia have said on their own, you know, land. They have said, we get punished and silenced and bullied and all the things by, you know, settlers and by this colonial project, but never have we seen the level that Palestinians get. And they were speaking to, you know, what was happening in the media, and I have countless examples that are all available online, so I don't need to recount them, but countless examples of things that have happened, and we're seeing happen right now in media, in government, in like the height of institutional power, that have, you know, that illustrate just how much silencing and punishment, how insidious the kind of the tentacles of the Israeli lobby are. And so when you're constantly up against this kind of oppressive structure and system, that isn't just coming for you, it's coming for black communities in the US. Like, you guys know that they train police here, right? So there's links here. You know that they're providing Azerbaijan with the arms to go and then also wipe out Armenians and ethnically cleanse Armenians. So Israel doesn't just impact Palestinians. Israel is genociding people in Gaza right now, but it's been bombing Lebanon, it's bombed Syria, it's had a hand in these, and it's positioned itself that way. It's the US's number one, best friend. So that is the reality of the situation. And so, though I understand the question and the frustration perhaps again around, like, there is a lot of space being taken up for this, it's because it's also what we are fighting is these globally oppressive connected systems, and in order for us to be able to fight them, we need to understand that liberation for Palestine means liberation for everyone else, but and vice versa, other movements too. So, which is why, and I'll end on this, when I'm in so-called Australia, I'm not just building Palestinians, so I'm not just concerned with my community and building capacity in my community. I am out there making sure that I understand my privileges and my responsibilities as a settler on stolen land, constantly trying to do the work and educate and build Black Palestinian, and that's Black First Nations and Afro-Black Palestinian solidarity, understanding, awareness, so that we're able to actually get closer to liberation, if that makes sense, or freedom and rights and dignity, or our vision of it. Yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to add a couple of things. So from living in Europe, I think part of it is the fact that Europeans feel so guilty about World War II, and frankly about the couple of thousand years before, where they treated Jewish people and expelled them left, right, and center. And it's very, we all understand that Jewish communities are separate to the Israeli state. But European governments, by and large, feel like their support of the Israeli state is somehow penance for what they did to Jewish communities over a couple of thousand years. So I think that is also something that happens internationally, is that there is such guilt and an inability to engage with their own history that they support the Israeli state and have no capacity to engage with the crimes that the Israeli state bestows, on Palestinian people. And also I think in the United States, the Israeli, American taxpayer dollars fund the bombs. And so I think there is also, from an American citizen and taxpayer's perspective, there's also something you can do about it. And I think that's also something that people are activated about. We actually can, because it's our taxpayer money funding this war, we can pressure for that to stop. So I think there's a couple of dynamics there as well.
I love how Europe's answer to a history of anti-Semitism is to continue to just be anti-Semitic by conflating Jews with this state, an ethno-nation state.
Just leave the Muslims out, leave everybody else out of it. But those would be.
Does that answer your question? It really does. I guess I just thought more as I understand why, but more it worries me, sort of like what y'all were saying about unfollowing people on social media because you're realizing all these things when normally they didn't even have I guess it was more for me, a thought that I had was, I feel like it does give people a platform to have opinions where they otherwise wouldn't have, and it kind of that's what scares me the most.
Definitely.
Because even back a few years ago, it was shocking to me how many, and not to blast all white people, but how many white people weren't aware of racism and how devastated they would get, and they would get angrier than my black friends. They get angrier than my black. They would be like, "Why are they so upset? This is kind of just how it is." And it just, I think that's where I'm coming from, where I'm like, this is horrible. Obviously, this is a lot of horrible things have been happening. This is terrible, but this isn't a chance now for you to get upset or pick a side. The side should be humans.
Yes. Someone said they were hospitalized this week, and but don't say anything else. I can't break confidence, but someone said they were kind of really devastated by when this was early on, and I was really kind of shocked because I was like, we don't have the luxury to be devastated, to even grieve, to even mourn, but you are telling me that you're so devastated, like this is a white person, so you know, and they were really impacted by the death of like a child, and I was like, that is our reality, and I never want to be callous to our own people's death, but at the same time, I actually literally, if I stop, I don't even know if I'm gonna get back up, honestly. Yeah. And also, if I stop, I have a responsibility to all the communities that I'm organizing with and all the people I'm in community with right now that need me to do things. Like, we need each other, and right now each other is all we have. So I can't even mourn the dead because there are living people who need me right now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you both are incredible. Thank you for
Thank you.
for your time.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, we got one here. Yes, thank you.
I'm really curious about your relationship with grief and the way that, well, I guess, I don't know how to frame the question, but do you find that it's possible to create work as an artist that is separate from grief?
What a beautiful question.
So, short answer, yes, and is what I'll say. So, like a couple of the essays in this collection, like one in particular, I wrote in one go, no edits, and it was in a moment of like intense emotion. And I think quite often, for me personally, and I don't know what your process is, Sara, but for me, like, there are different types of grief. In the most traumatizing times in my life, I can't write. Can't do it. There have been periods where I've gone, I'm someone who, like, from a very young age would, like, keep a diary, always have records. There are periods of my life for years where I could not write because the grief, there was no space. And there are times when the writing enables me to, like, opens a door for my grief in a way that is transformative. I can't tell you what the difference is between those two things, but sometimes it just happens. I do think it is important, though, for me, that I write things that, and, you know, the word might seem glib, but I write things that are joyful. I write things that are uplifting, inspiring. I think it is about imagining futures beyond grief, because I think that to me is in itself some sort of like rebellious resistance. I write comedies, I write characters that don't let the world get them down, and that there is joy in that for me. So I think, alhamdulillah, for me there is space in my writing for all of these different things. Yeah.
I think I'll say very quickly that as a Palestinian and as a writer, both, I try to resist, the inevitability of grief, the inevitability of loss. I don't want to write from that lens all the time and like reduce us to that. And reduce us to something that's like, I say, like writing, resistance literature is really important, and there's a long history of that in Palestinian literature, Ghassan Kanafani and others. But I also think that writing kind of just constantly in opposition to something can sometimes give power to that or reduces you to that, whereas I'm thinking more around how do we transcend that, absorb it and write to our full like complexity and write beyond just as a response, as if, I just exist in relation to that other thing, right? Or the thing I'm writing against. So having said that, like in wanting to resist, the inevitability of being just grief or being just trauma, I find that I sometimes also just like have a knee-jerk reaction to it and like against it, and I'm just like, no, I don't want that. But in doing that, I'm also almost kind of ironically still giving it that power. And so I'm trying to see grief as I see other emotions and not giving it any, more, again, exceptional weight anymore, any less. But if I'm gonna write about, and it's okay that your relationship with these emotions, grief and otherwise, ebb and flow. And if I'm gonna write about that, then I'm gonna write to to it, like try and do it justice and try and write to the fullest, you know, like complexity of that emotion as I do other emotions as well. And so like that to me is the best thing I can do as a writer, right? From a place of that freedom without any expectations, even against myself and reacting to myself, if that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Oh, okay. Really quickly. Yes, Daksh, we have one more question and then we will, no,
I guess we're here all party all night. Yeah. Oh,
Ryan's disappeared. Ryan's
okay.
like, sorry.
We have one
Ryan,
and then
sorry.
one.
Can we have a couple more questions? Is that all right?
Yeah.
2 more. All right, we'll take them both at the same time and then we'll, yeah? Oh my God, I love it when the questions just flow.
I just wanted to follow on from what you were saying a bit, and was really inspired by the example that you shared about Sudanese protests being around like building and imagining like the futures in these really tangible forms through protest. And Sara, you talked about spec fic, and a lot of the threads of what you've talked about relates to imagining futures. So I just wanted to invite you both to reflect on what are the futures you're imagining.
Thank you. We'll take this question as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I had a quick comment and then a question very fast, I promise. Before, I think you had mentioned that you were surprised about not to attack white people, but their reactions currently. And I just always find it funny because more recently, when January 6th happened, I found it like very funny how the reactions after that. I saw a ton of white people saying that they were surprised and that they're ashamed of America and that this isn't us. And me and my friends, who are all people like we're brown and black Twitter, are looking around like, where have you guys been for the last however many hundred years?
The this isn't us, the this isn't us rhetoric is...
If this isn't the epitome of this place, then so that happens a lot. But my question is, when is it the right time to educate someone who's not only ignorant to what your people are going through, but is ignorant to what it takes for you to exist? And I ask that because in a group chat with a handful of my friends, I just relayed information about the march in DC soon and that I'll be attending, and that if anyone wants to tag along. And one of my friends, not to air out NYPD, but he's a police officer, and no joke, his comment was he doesn't enjoy protests because it's like shameful to say this, but he doesn't enjoy protests because it causes a lot of traffic and a lot of people call him names.
Genocide is inconvenient, right?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and
the traffic,
no, the traffic, like true, like this is real life.
I mean,
this is real life. The jokes write themselves.
And the reason I asked that question is because I don't even have time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? To like just tell you how, like, I don't have time. But would you say that it's important to engage in that, or you know what I'm saying?
You have more space and grace than me today, I think we established. So could you mind taking that question? Because
I think it depends. I think sometimes I think in those situations, like we all have, I like to think of it as like a box of matches, and you don't want to waste all your matches on shit that doesn't matter, right? So like, pick your battles. Is this somebody who, like, is this the conversation that's going to move the needle, to use a corporate term? Like, sometimes you just need to like see that and then vent to somebody else about it, and then come back, and then like come back to that person with like a refreshed, box of matches, whatever. There are some cases, because often for me, the investment to educate, especially when it comes to friends, is a gift. Right? It is actually a gift. So if I'm going to choose to spend it is not like about shaming them or whatever, but it's like I'm actually providing an opportunity for you to become a better person. And if you're going to receive that, great, and we can kind of move on together. But if not, now I understand the limits of my relationship with you. Right? So I think you have to, it's not actually about them, you have to decide where your capacity is. I read something interesting today, which was like, education does not necessarily lead to behavior change. Because we know lots of very educated people who know all the right words, but do they behave in ways that show integrity? Do they behave along the lines of justice? Quite often not. And so I think this is also it. Like, just because the person knows doesn't mean their behavior will change. And what we actually get, like, the way we achieve behavior change is different. It might actually be like, bro, I know about the traffic, but why don't you just come along this one time? And the experience itself makes a transformation for him that wouldn't have happened, him, her, them, that wouldn't have happened if you had had a conversation. Because also, conversations aren't the only way through which change occurs.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend, we will answer this question, or do you want to add anything else?
I just want to say thank you so much
Thank
for that
you, yeah.
question. I think it's really important, and it's important to meet people where they're at, but I think Yas probably said the bulk of what I'll say, which is it really depends, and you've really just got to think about the intention and whether there's a point and, the values. And ultimately, there's a saying that I remind myself of, which is people, often it's not, I'll believe it when I see it. It's actually, I'll see it when I believe it. So people have to believe things in order to see them. That's the kind of the frame of reference and the filter, which kind of puts things into perspective sometimes. But yeah. Thanks, Yas.
Thank you. Really quickly, we will answer. Would you like to talk about your imagined future?
I mean, it's really hard, though necessary. I've been saying, that is literally the work of artists right now, is to be able to name what is happening, but also name it, like envision and put language to alternative futures, because that is what we can do from our position as artists right now in these different spaces. And so I'm really struggling with that, I have to admit. But I know for me, one of the things is a future that doesn't have borders or kind of walls or these, like machinery that is out to exclude people. Things, barriers that exclude or keep people out. That's the kind of like future where, I'd like to see, where we have less of those things, I suppose.
Yes. I was literally going to say the same thing. A future with no borders, a future where everybody's needs are met, a future where we trust in each other.
I love that.
A future where we live in sustainable ways with our environment, in ways that enriches our environment as much as it enriches us.
I love that.
Where people have faith in whatever, and that faith enriches them and enriches the people around them. A future where people don't have to choose between creating art and living, and
and a good co-op.
And a good co-op.
Yeah,
We're going to make the co-op happen.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
So
I'm
much.
Yasmin Abdel-Magied.
Really
This is
appreciate
Sara
it.
Saleh.
Thank you, yes.
Our books are available
Thank you
on
for
the
coming.
internet and over here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Safe journeys. Thank
you
you.
to the People's
And
Forum.
Thank you to the...
Yes.
Thank you. Shout out to Ryan Yue and the whole team. Thank you so
Ryan,
much.
give it up for Ryan.